So I think we can almost start. Let me see. I'm going to mention this as well, but maybe it's good to start off by muting all the mics.
Just to let you know, we are live, Adina, right now. Yeah.
I'll mute my mic.
Thank you. Well, I think we can start. So good morning and welcome to the launch of the Global Monitor on COVID-19's impact on democracy and human rights. My name is Adina Trunk and I am the Special Advisor to the Secretary General of International IDEA, the organization who developed this monitor in partnership and with the support of the European Union. Since we have only 1 hour at our disposal, but many prominent speakers and the world premiere of the Global Monitor to look forward to, I would like to start straight away by asking everybody who is not currently taking the floor to mute their mics. I should also mention that this webinar will be live streamed on YouTube and available for those of you who can't join today on International IDEA's website, idea.int. Last but not least, in case you have social media and would like to tweet about this event, please use the hashtag Global Monitor. Now, without further ado, I'm honored to give the floor to the first speaker of today, Ms. Jutta Urpilainen, the European Commissioner for International Partnerships. Ms. Urpilainen, we're very glad that you've taken the time to be with us today. Please, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. Democracy dies in darkness. This slogan of the American newspaper Washington Post sums up elegantly the importance of safeguarding democracy in the times of trouble. Since the COVID-19 outbreak, we have focused a lot on the health crisis and the socio-economic crisis. There is a third dimension that should not be sidelined: the impact of the pandemic on human rights and democracy worldwide. Often the weakest are hit hardest in crisis. We cannot let the response to the crisis suppress the rights of the most vulnerable, shrink space for civil society, or restrict fundamental freedoms. Nor should it prevent pluralism, political participation, and transparency. Nor should it stand in the way of free elections or parliamentary scrutiny. Nor undermine privacy and protection of personal data. So if and when democracy dies in darkness, we must provide light. We need to understand how to respond to the pandemic affect democracy and human rights. To what extent are violations on the rise, and who is the most impacted? The EU adopted an ambitious action plan on democracy and human rights just when the pandemic started. But you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Therefore, I'm personally very delighted that the EU has partnered with International IDEA to develop the monitoring tool going live today. This tool provides reliable data and analysis on developments in 162 countries in the world. Global Monitor reflects strongly across the board cooperation. Its data will be of use for the Commission, for the European Parliament, for the civil society, journalists, and every single one of us. It will have data and analysis from international IDEA, but also information gathered from leading civil society organizations, think tanks, and universities, bringing together the data and knowledge available. This is a collective spirit in which we have worked since the beginning of the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, from the moment the COVID outbreak became a pandemic, Team Europe took a coordinated action to help our partner countries. We chose partnership and multilateralism instead of closer and unilateralism. And we continue to ensure that the global recovery response is just, inclusive, sustainable, and respectful of fundamental rights and values. That is why when the pandemic threatens to cast darkness on us, we provide light with hard facts on development of democracy and human rights. We do it because we stand for transparency, facts, and evidence-based information. Because we stand for public accountability. Because we stand for human rights and democracy. Thank you.
Commissioner, for this very important message and for your personal commitment for democracy and human rights. I think particularly in these times, this is very much needed so that, like you said, democracy doesn't die in darkness. Now, speaking of great personal but also professional commitment to democracy, I would like now to introduce Dr. Kevin Casas-Zamora, the Secretary General of International IDEA. Thank you so much for taking the floor.
Thank you, Lina, and good morning. I would like to start by thanking the European Commission and Commissioner Urpilainen in particular for supporting this project and for entrusting International IDEA to develop this global monitor, which tracks the impact of COVID-19 on democracy and human rights. We're very grateful and proud of this partnership. The relationship between International IDEA and the European Union is wide, deep, and enormously constructive, and this, I hope, has the potential to bring it to a new level. For those of you who are not so familiar with International IDEA, we are an intergovernmental organization with 33 member states from all over the world, with the exclusive mandate to support and strengthen democratic institutions and processes around the world. Our work has a dual nature. We take pride in calling ourselves a think and do tank. On one hand, we develop cutting-edge, evidence-based, comparative, policy-oriented knowledge on matters related to electoral processes, political parties and representation, constitutional processes, and democratic reforms writ large. On the other hand, we help to apply this knowledge on the ground through technical assistance aimed at policymakers, civil society, institutions, and public authorities on the national and local levels. And on that capacity, we are currently active in over 70 countries around the world. It is this combination of thinking and doing, of knowledge and action, that makes IDEA unique and has enabled us to add value and earn the trust of our counterparts globally and locally over the past 25 years. In times of great perplexity, such as this one, there's a need for both. We need knowledge in the form of accurate and updated data, facts, and figures. And we need actions based on this knowledge. This is true for the health crisis caused by this pandemic, as it is true for all the economic, political, and social consequences that will stem from it. Over the past 4 months, the coronavirus pandemic has truly changed the world, causing disruption of a magnitude not seen since the Second World War. Aside from the global health crisis, the world is now faced with an economic contraction not seen in nearly a century, and social consequences that we are barely beginning to understand. As though that wasn't enough, it has already dawned on all of us that this global emergency will almost certainly have, it is already having, profound political implications. The risks for democracy are clear and pressing. Until now, political leaders at all levels have been responding to the pandemic with an exceptional set of measures aimed to curb the spread of the virus, protect public health, and save the economy. This is pertinent and legitimate up to a point. Because the truth is that around the world, we are seeing authoritarian regimes using this crisis to silence critics and tighten their political grip on power. Even some democratically elected governments are fighting the pandemic by amassing emergency powers in ways that go beyond what's healthy for democracy and human rights. Measures such as silencing critical media and arresting journalists, harassing civil society activists, or using minorities as scapegoats are very hard to justify from a democratic standpoint. Our public debates are rife with articles and analysis of these actions, and several online databases have been generated to track certain aspects of democracy that are being affected by the current pandemic. What was missing was a kind of one-stop shop, compiling all this information into one accessible online platform geared at busy policymakers, politicians, civil society groups, journalists, as well as the general public. This is what we are launching today. This effort relies heavily on the extensive work underpinning our Global State of Democracy report, which we published for the second time last November. But it also relies on our great partnerships with research centers and organizations such as the VDEM Institute at the University of Gothenburg, the International Center for Non-for-Profit Law, the Center for Civil and Political Rights, Civicus, Oxford University, and many others. We have developed a tool updated every 2 weeks, which provides an evidence-based overview of the COVID-19 measures adopted by 162 governments around the world and their likely impact on democracy and human rights. The monitor also highlights which particular developments may be cause for concern. The idea is not to rank countries or provide simplistic judgments, but rather to identify targeted areas to watch for policymakers, journalists, and activists. As you will see in the upcoming presentation, the online platform provides a global overview, 162 country profiles with detailed information, including on their democratic performance before the pandemic, regional analysis, links to additional resources, as well as knowledge products on COVID-19 and democracy. For us at International IDEA, this is the kind of work that binds it all together. It is part of a comprehensive institutional endeavor to protect democracy through our knowledge products, but also through our actions on many fronts, including the work we are doing with parliaments through inter pares, yet another partnership with the European Union, and a recently launched call to defend democracy supported by more than 500 organizations and leaders from around the world. At this dark time, democracy needs defending. We must not lose sight that the road to recover in a fair way from this pandemic and to prevent the next one runs through good democratic governance. We hope that this monitor will help policymakers, journalists, activists, and citizens understand the stakes and take action so that democracy doesn't become yet another casualty of the coronavirus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary General, for these inspiring remarks and for so eloquently making the case for why this monitor is so sorely needed at this point and why knowledge about the impacts of COVID-19 on democracy are really what we need in order to be able to take the right actions for this crisis and the next. Now, before I give the floor to our next speaker, I would like to mention that you can already now start writing your questions in the Q&A sections of the WebEx platform for the penultimate part of the program. But without further ado, I would still like to move on. So I would like to invite Ms. Hannah Neumann, who is the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on Human Rights in the European Parliament, to take the floor. Ms. Neumann, we're delighted that you could be with us today.
Thank you, Adina, and good morning, everybody. Before I start, I really think I should extend a big thank you to Jutta Urpilainen and her big team, as well as to Kevin Zamora and his smaller team for making this thing happen so quickly and with such intense depth. I think that is an outstanding achievement. The pandemic started 4 months ago. I think we were discussing this the first time 3 months ago, and now we have such a platform. And I think this platform can be a very important tool. I think we all still remember this moment or these many moments when we were glued to the television and seeing the horrific health crisis in first China, then France, Italy, then other countries around the world. But a bit hidden from this mainstream reporting, we also saw these many restrictions to individual freedoms, to human rights, and to democracy. Some of them were justified. But we soon realized some of them are not. Some of them are in the gray zone. And I try to keep track, just what is happening where, how do I assess it? How can we make sure they are taken back? And it was so quickly, I think, that we all lost track. And there was this feeling emerging, we need to have more information. We need to make sure that we should shed light on what happens in the darkness, as Jutta Urpilainen said. And that's why I think, and that's how I think the idea was born about this tracker. And that's why I think it is so important that we now have this one-stop shop, because many civil society organizations, many research organizations, many think tanks started monitoring, but only on a specific region or a specific topic. But bringing together this information, I think, is exactly what we need, because as much as we monitor the health situation, we monitor the number of infected people, we monitor the number of deaths, we monitor the number of recovered. I think we also need to monitor what this pandemic means for human rights and democracy. And I think having this knowledge is especially key for 3 reasons. The first reason is to just have the data and the information so that we can question what measures are proportionate, what measures are bound directly to the pandemic, and to have a debate about it. Because in many countries, the measures put in place are actually just preventing the debate to happen domestically. So at least now we can have them on an international level. The second thing is, and I hope this will already be very important to work the second half of this year, to just track whether the restrictions put in place are being taken back as soon as the pandemic ceases, because it's not for sure. Many of them are just not time bound, so we need to hold governments accountable and question and make sure they are taking them back. And the third aspect, maybe a bit for the longer run, is just to learn. Because it's the first time that we are in such an encompassing global pandemic. And we don't know which restrictions are working to help stop the pandemic? Which restrictions are not working? We don't know which ones work in some region and they don't work in the other regions. And we already have seen that some restrictions, especially those targeting freedom of expression, are reaching the exact opposite. So if journalists are no longer allowed to report on numbers, if they are no longer allowed to report on the health condition in some hospitals, this doesn't help to fight the pandemic. It just builds fear and mistrust and leads to the exact opposite. And I think these are the lessons we need to carefully monitor and learn from, because I'm afraid we may just see another pandemic. So I really hope that many will use this tool. I hope that civil society organizations, even local ones, will continue to contribute to the database, because I think what we will launch now will not be complete. It cannot be complete. But I also hope that civil society organizations, but maybe even more journalists and us politicians, use this as a valuable resource to hold our own governments accountable, but also governments all around the globe, to make sure that human rights and democracy do not die in darkness, but that we shed light exactly on what is happening. So now I have to admit, I really love to listen now to Yasmin Wehani and Jessica Musila for their own assessments of the situation, because they are working on the ground. And I really look forward to finally see this thing online, and I'm sure we will make good use of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Neumann. I think you summarized it so well, and I'm really glad to hear how you express the need for such a tool, especially coming from you as a policymaker. I'm sure that many more out there are feeling the same, but also highlighting the importance of information, of accurate information, of updated information, in order to both deal with the current crisis, but also learn from it and then be better prepared for the next one. And thank you also personally for making such a nice segue to the introduction of the next speakers, because now we've heard from policymakers, and I think that it's really important that we also bring in the voices from the civil society. So we're pleased to have not one, but two great representatives here with us today. First, I would like to give the floor to Yasmin Piraine, who is an award-winning fellow at Women Deliver. She's also an EDD 2019 Young Leader, as well as the founder of the podcast and platform We Belong. Thank you so much, Ms. Piraine, for being here with us today. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be surrounded by such like-minded people that are advocating for the rights of the silenced ones, I would say, because I mean, I'm very, very happy to be given the floor in such sphere, but I don't even get it on my own country, which is Italy. But anyway, I'm super happy to be here. And, you know, we enter in the second half of 2020. And as a young woman of 24 years old, my generation has lived a decade in 6 months. I mean, we will hardly forget this period. And we grew so much in 6 months. We approached death in a different way, especially in Italy. It was so, you know, normal to die, but also precarity and inequality and the huge impact that COVID-19 will have on our lives in the next few years. I want to talk not only as a person, but as a woman. So I want to put my gender, my age, my ethnicity, but also my socioeconomic background on the table and discuss. Because we spoke about the COVID-19 at the beginning as an equalizer, and I've been advocating and mentioning that this is not. It has been a moment that's displayed our privileges and our underprivileges into a loop. And so for me, the world is going, you know, the uprisings are increasing. I'm seeing protests and oppression in Hong Kong. I'm seeing also in Addis Ababa blackout protests occurring since several weeks, and a death toll that arose till 160 deaths as per today. So of course we are in a difficult time to be alive, especially since the case of George Floyd. But as a European, I have a responsibility to speak also for our region. And I'm super happy of this platform. I think it's a great step. When I discovered this platform, we see we can track impact on every and each country. And for me, it's super important because what I do is meaningless if I can't have data that support my points. So thank you so much. But then of course, we should find ways to use this data. I'm also impact-oriented, always impact-oriented. And so for me in Europe, the impact of COVID-19, I would resume it in 3 points. We first saw a social impact where the vulnerable citizens, often the poorest, were at the front lines, often nurses, food deliverers, supermarket employees. But also then we saw these racial justice appraisings following the death of George Floyd. And I want to mention, you can check on my Twitter, I've been reporting so many cases of police violence in France since the start of the lockdown. So it's a structural problem. It's just that the George Floyd case shed the light on it, and it's not random that 100,000 people manifested and protested in Paris, because it's a structural issue that we don't address. And then finally, we have this post-crisis, how we as young people will face this precarity. You know, me, myself, I will graduate in September. As many young people, we don't even know what we will be doing. We will find a job. And I'm super happy, and that's why I'm super happy of the efforts of the European Commission with a huge budget that was put in place to protect citizens. I think it's unique compared to other regions and to how other countries are dealing with the crisis. So we need to treasure this, but also communicate better about this, because when I hear what the Commission does, and when I hear what the Italians, for example, think about what the Commission does, there is a huge gap. And I think that, of course, it's a responsibility of the local governments and the politicians that also nourish hate. Kevin, I know that you were speaking about minorities as scapegoats. I mean, I've paid myself the price for these. And, you know, the security decree in Italy that was put in place by the former Minister of Interior, Salvini, has a huge impact on migrants. As for now, with this crisis, migrants are still discriminated. And we saw also the Macerata attack, a terrorist attack perpetrated by a far-right terrorist in Italy. So who protects us, right? We are talking about human rights. Who protects me as a brown woman, but Black people, especially in Europe? So this is my main point. I will not keep it too long, but we need to also make sure that Hungary, Poland, all those countries that use the COVID-19 to establish, to detriment sexual and reproductive rights, freedom of speech, data protection rights. Hungary did this, and GDPR. They use this COVID-19 crisis to set unlimited power or increase their power, and that's scary for a European. So that's my main point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kurena, for this very moving remarks and for shedding light on the inequality aspects, which were amplified by how the crisis affected minorities, different socioeconomic group, young people, and so on. I think that this is an important aspect for us and for all the policymakers out there to bear in mind. And it's been much more on the news right now due to what has happened, but at the same time, this is something that has persisted for a very long time and will persist even after the media will maybe report on it on a daily basis. So it's something that we need to keep working on. To move on, I would like now to also say a big thank you to Ms. Jessica Musila, who will be our next speaker representing civil society. She is a civil society practitioner and an open governance fellow from Kenya and the think tank Local Development Research Institute. So please, the floor is yours, Ms. Musila.
Hello. Thank you, Adina, for the kind introduction and invitation to join this eminent panel. I acknowledge the EU Commissioner for International Partnerships, the chairperson of the Human Rights Committee in the European Parliament, and Yasmin, and most of all, of course, Kevin Casas, the Secretary General of the International IDEA. Congratulations to the International IDEA on the launch of the Global Monitor to track the impact of COVID-19 on democracy and human rights, a much needed resource in these times. No other single challenge has underlined how interdependent the world is. COVID-19, the menace that started in China, has gone on to terrorize every country in the world. The coronavirus epidemic has highlighted inequalities and the need for a unified front in responding to them. There's been a clawback on essential liberties like the right to information, right to assemble, press freedom. Some governments have become authoritarian, diluting the parliamentary oversight or even shutting them down, and even the public's right to free and fair elections. In Africa, we've even seen elections which have not been monitored at all. Gender-based violence has been on the increase in Kenya and in many parts of the world. And with this has also come a lot of police brutality in trying to put in place measures to protect the so-called bottom of the pyramid who live in slums in developing nations. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement is also a testament to inequalities in the West. And so the Global Monitor becomes a very essential tool. It's opportune to have it in place at such a time. As Michelle Bachelet said a while back, a threat to one is a menace to all. No country can defeat these challenges and threats alone. The Global Monitor is a mirror to the world on the state of democracy and what it has become. I appreciate that it will provide analysis on information that would have been difficult to get, especially as civil liberties get contested in many countries. Fact-based information is key to transparency and accountability. In addition, it's going to support debates that are sometimes being constrained in local countries at the local level and being pushed to the international level. You find that agenda setting role of the media has been compromised in the past. And with this comes the challenge, the portal provides opportunity for people to start having stories without that being challenged. We also see opportunity for civil society and even countries to learn from others on how they have addressed different challenges. Women participation in politics has been highlighted, and it is essential that the countries that have responded the best in the world have been mostly the ones which have been led by women. And so I'm hoping that people will take the opportunity to use the information and even that experience to actually advocate for more women in politics. Martin Luther King said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Human rights are indivisible. We all must stand as one for the rights of all, and especially the voiceless and marginalized among us. Economic growth is not everything. We are as strong as our weakest link. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Musila, for these inspiring remarks, and also for truly showcasing that this is not just a tool for policymakers. This is also something that you perceive is needed for civil society organizations to be able to cast light on injustices and on problems for democracy, for human rights, stemming out of the measures taken in the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I think that we've come to the part of the program which I guess we've all been waiting for, the world premiere of the Global Monitor on COVID-19's impact on democracy and human rights. And who better to present this than the project coordinator and our brilliant colleague, Elisenda Bareste-Buxo. Elisenda, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Adina, and I would like to thank you, the European Union and International IDEA, for trusting me to coordinate this project. It has been some interesting weeks, but we are very happy with the result, and I'm going to present it. So, second here. The situation we are facing now is unprecedented. The COVID-19 pandemic is having profound effects on societies and economies around the world. Analysts and policymakers are searching for ways to both understand the crisis and its ramifications, as well as finding the right policy solution during the crisis. COVID-19 is also stretching into the political sphere, with ramifications for the health and sustainability of democracy and fundamental rights, with countries imposing severe restrictions on freedoms and some even grabbing opportunities for executive aggrandizement in the name of fighting the pandemic. When the crisis broke, the online sphere quickly proliferated with articles and analysis of the impact of COVID-19 on democracy and human rights. Amnesty International, Article 19, Human Rights Watch, and Freedom House are some of the institutions that have provided web articles on specific topics or countries on an ongoing basis. Also, the number of online trackers started to be produced and are still compiling information on the measures imposed. These trackers generally focus on one or few aspects of democracy and human rights. For example, the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law, ICNL, has an overview of legislation on emergency powers, freedom of expression, and freedom of assembly. Another example is the Center for Civil and Political Rights, CCPR, that tracks the policy measures taken to combat the spread of the virus. VDEM developed the Pandemic Democratic Violations Index that captures the extent to which state responses to COVID-19 violate democratic standards for emergency responses, and the Pandemic Backsliding Index that reflects the extent to which such responses pose a risk of democratic decline within the country. On parliaments, we can find Inter Pares, a program funded by the European Union and also implemented by International IDEA, has a very comprehensive data tracker that showcases the measures that have been taken by most of the parliaments around the world. And the last example, at International IDEA, we are also tracking elections worldwide and the impact of COVID-19 has had on them. All this is very good. We can find trackers that cover different topics, but overall, what was currently missing was an easily accessible online platform that was independent, reliable, and that provides a succinct overview of COVID-19 related measures on country developments affecting key aspects of democracy and human rights. Also missing was a contextual analysis on the state of democracy in the countries before the pandemic broke out. Either we found quantitative data or qualitative analysis on how measures taken by governments impact on democracy and human rights. Another thing that was missing was a tool that was user-friendly for policymakers, civil society organizations, journalists, and the public in general. A tool that provided easy access to democracy and human rights related data and analyzed COVID-19 measures by country, by region, and even globally. A tool that helped identify countries where measures and actions implemented to curb the spread of COVID-19 present concerns from a democracy and human rights perspective. And finally, a monitor that would help multilateral and bilateral donors, non-governmental organizations, and civil society organizations with their programming, advocacy strategies, and help them prioritize accordingly. So with this in mind, we thought that a one-stop shop was needed, an online monitoring tool of COVID-19 measures adopted by countries. A platform that will be able to give a contextual analysis of the democratic state of the countries before the pandemic started, give data, and provide succinct analysis. The Global Monitor will cover the 162 countries of the Global State of Democracy indices and will be based on the Global State of Democracy framework. A two-level monitoring tool will identify which measures and actions taken by governments are concerning developments or developments to watch from a democracy and human rights perspective. As I said, the base of the global monitor will be the global state of democracy framework, which has 5 attributes: representative government, fundamental rights, checks on government, impartial administration, and participatory engagement. It also has 16 sub-attributes and 8 subcomponents, which through the civil liberties like freedom of expression, freedom of association and assembly, and freedom of movement, provide some of the human rights perspective to this monitor. The platform will be housed on the Global State of Democracy Indices website. There you will be able to find the pre-pandemic democratic levels for each of the Global State of Democracy framework aspects by country up to December 2019. This will provide an analysis of the democratic situation of each of the 162 countries before the pandemic broke. The mapping is meant to provide an easily accessible and digestible overview by country of COVID-19 measures that affect democracy and how they evolve during the course of the pandemic. And it's updated twice a month. Our data comes not only from different trackers that I mentioned, it comes from authoritative and reliable sources, which we triangulate, and from expertise that we have gathered through regional consultants, thematic consultants, but most importantly, the regional offices and the expertise that we have at IDEA. We have developed a questionnaire within our methodology that has enabled all the involved in data collection to follow the same standards for every country. We have also developed a 2-level monitoring tool that aims to indicate primarily where there are issues or developments that give rise to concern from a democracy and human rights perspective. A measure considered a concerning development, marked with a warning sign, is a measure or action to curb COVID-19 deemed as undemocratic because they are disproportionate, unnecessary, illegal, or indefinite. A development to be watched, marked with a loop, is a measure or action where a transgression of democratic standards may occur if enforced or maintained over time. It is important to mention that in every update, these labels will be checked. And for example, if a measure that has been a development to watch is lifted, the loop will be erased too. The criteria that we have been using is very specific, and if you would like to learn more, please access our methodology document in the About page of the Global State of Democracy Indices website. So let's see how the platform works. When we enter the site, we see the map of the world and the labels that show us how the measures adopted by the governments in the context of COVID-19 crisis have had an impact on democracy and human rights. Developments that are concerning are featured as a warning sign, and developments to watch are featured as a loop. The map also shows the regime types of every country covered by the Global State of Democracy Indices, regime types that are based on pre-pandemic scores of the indices. 3 regime types have been identified: democracies in green, hybrid regimes in lilac, and authoritarian regimes in orange. At the same time, democracies have been divided into high-performing democracies, mid-range or low-performing democracies, and are color-coded in different tones of greens. So if you go to the left side of the website, you can find the 5 attributes of democracy of the Global State of Democracy framework. You can open each one and see the sub-attributes, or even the subcomponents. If we click, for example, in fundamental rights, the map will show us the performance of each country, with the scores going between 0 and 1, 0 being the lowest and 1 the highest on that specific attribute. We can filter and unfilter the COVID-19 feature. So if we have the filter on, we can see the labels that show us if a country has a concerning development or developments to watch. And that is the same for all aspects of democracy. So, for example, we see that this country has some concerning developments. If we click in this label, it will take us to the country COVID-19 profile. Here we will be able to see a comprehensive profile of the countries and the measures that have been taken in the COVID-19 context. The profile is based on the Global State of Democracy framework, and it provides pre-pandemic indices scores, and is also color-coded according to the performance each aspect has had up until 2019. So at the beginning, we can see that we can see the regime type of the country. Then we can see if a state of emergency has been declared and if it has been lifted, a brief summary of the country, and then a comprehensive look on the measures that have taken to curb COVID-19 will be portrayed that aspect. At the end of the profile, we have the specific will of the country and the aspects that have had an impact due to COVID-19. We also have a bar chart with the scores and the world average for each sub-attribute that provides a sense of where the country is in relation to the others. And finally, the links that we used for the country profile. And this is the same for the 162 countries that we are covering. So for example, you can see the region Europe, sub-region, and then you can choose any country. As of August, we will have new features on the website. For example, we will be linking Johns Hopkins University website to portray the number of deaths per 100,000 inhabitants by country, and this will be updated daily under the basic well aspect of our framework. The summaries that appear when hovering above a country will also be more comprehensive. Because this crisis is evolving every day and measures are changing rapidly, the monitor is developing along with the situation. While all reasonable care has been taken in the compilation and publication of the contents of the global monitor, there may be missing information or information that may be unintentionally misportrayed. We welcome any feedback or comment and also any additional resources that can further enrich the global monitor. Our resources, of course, our website where you can navigate through the 162 countries and the 162 COVID-19 profiles, the different maps, get a regional or even a global perspective. You can also navigate through the global state of democracy indices and understand the pre-pandemic state of democracy. If you have any question or feedback, please contact me at iballesteboshow@idea.int or at our help desk global monitor at idea.int. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for this excellent presentation. And again, a big congratulations to the team. The monitor is a true gold mine for anyone wanting to find out how the pandemic is affecting democracy and human rights. Now, I can only assume that following all these enlightening presentations and speeches, there are many questions out there. Unfortunately, we only have the possibility to take a few of them here now. But I encourage you to send any remaining questions or queries you might have about the Global Monitor to the address that Alessandra just showed on the screen, which is globalmonitor@idea.int. We would love to hear from you and how we can improve this tool. So now I hope that there are some questions in the Q&A section of the WebEx platform. And let me see. And you can continue writing them. There is a little button in the middle of your screen, hopefully with a question mark where you can pose your questions. So let me see what we have. We have a question from Oxfam. Iria Folguera, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. She writes, I would like to know if it is possible to provide input about cases of human rights violation in the framework of the pandemic, and so how would it work? Alessandra, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, yes, please, Ms. Iria Folgueira, would you be so kind to send us the information to globalmonitor@idea.int, and we will be happy to be in contact with you and see a collaboration between us. It's really important to have the most up-to-date information in the monitor, especially coming with human rights violations. So please do contact us and we can follow up.
Right, then there is, I could also see a question earlier on, let me see, about yeah, some of the bigger trends. So which elements are being more affected globally, and do you see any trend for that? Elisenda, maybe this is again for you.
Yes, sorry. We are still working on the trends, but I can tell you briefly that Asia and Africa are the regions with the largest share of countries with developments of concern from a democratic and human rights perspective. 63 countries in Asia have developments of concern, and 57 of countries in Africa also. Asia and the Americas are the regions with most democracies with developments of concern. All 44 countries in Europe have developments to watch. 9 out of 25 countries in the America have developments of concerns. 6 of those are democracies. And the aspect of democracy with most countries with developments of concern is freedom of expression.
Okay, good. The next question comes from Suleimana Umar from Lund University, and they're wondering why we have only considered 162 countries, and if they're looking for specific information on a country that is not currently in the monitor, how can we help?
Well, we just cover 162 countries because we cover countries that have more than 1 million inhabitants. And that is because of the easiness for our indicators to have information from the 97 indicators that we use for our global state of democracy framework. If you would like to have more information on countries that are not part of the GSOD indices, please contact us and we will make sure to help you accordingly.
Great. Now, there are also questions about evaluations of specific activities in certain countries, such as Darfur and it's from El Hassan, who is asking, how do you evaluate the situation and activity carried out by citizens of Neriti in central Darfur, taking advantage of the window of democratic opportunity brought about by the transition government in Sudan, and how can emerging democracy be better supported? Now, I guess this is a more specific question, so maybe there's an opportunity for this person to get back to you, or do you want to mention anything?
Well, obviously, I don't have all the answers for the 162 countries, but yes, please do contact us. I want to assure you that all the information that we have gathered has been through regional consultants that have been helping us to gather information, our own experts at International IDEA, thematic advisors, and of course, the regions that are extremely important for us to get their feedback from. So country offices, regional offices from International IDEA have been helping a lot. And if you would like, you can send the global monitor at idea.int your specific concern, and I can redirect you to the people that can help you within our regions.
Yes, thank you. I also have a question from Barbara Caracciolo from Solidar, which is a CSO network, and she's asking, is there any format through which we can provide information?
Not really. We have not developed any format, but again, please contact us and we can help you, and maybe we can even develop a relationship so you can feed into the monitor.
And again, for those who didn't have time to note it down or who joined a bit later, the address to write to is globalmonitor in one word at idea.int. I also have a question from Roger Cattell, who's wondering, can you share experience about difficulty in getting information while preparing the report?
Yes, we have tried to compile most of the information from the primary sources, governments, and it has proven difficult for in some regions where where you have authoritarian regimes or where governments have not had don't share information that easily. But I have to say that though it has been a very difficult exercise, we have gathered all the information that we could, again, through these regional consultants that are in country or our regional offices that have been very helpful.
Right. We also have maybe time for one last question. And then I have a question myself. So I have questions. If you can get a copy of the presentation made by you, of course you can. Please write to us. And then we also have a question from Danny de Kaiser, who is an individual member of the ALDE party. And the question is, what do you think that we can do to the new refugees who are coming from the African continent to the European continent because of the COVID-19 pandemic? The government can't help. I'm not sure this is a question for this session, but it's definitely something that I think will be a lot discussed and debated in the coming months. Now, I have a question also, if I may, for Ms. Neumann. How do you think that you will be able to use this more practically in your work in the European Parliament?
Thank you, Adina. Well, first of all, I'm working in human rights and foreign policy. So when we talk about certain countries, when we have speakers from those countries, and we make statements on certain countries, I think it is an important tool to just check how the situation is, what are the issues of concern, and what do we want to address. But as I also said in my speech earlier on, it's also about trends and just learning and being better set up for the future and for another pandemic. So I think it's especially these two tracks that we will use it mostly. And don't forget, every member of the European Parliament, even if they are not primarily working on foreign policy, are members of delegation, for example, so relations to specific countries. And I think for them, this would also be a very valuable resource.
Yeah, indeed, and I can only assume that or hope that this is also the case for other policymakers and politicians out there who would also like to shed light on some of these developments, especially if they're working on democracy and human rights. Now, I think that these are all the questions that we have time for now. And so in closing, I would like to thank all the speakers, Commissioner Urpilainen and MEP Neumann, as well as Ms. Musila and Ms. Kirane for taking the time to attend our launch, and of course our Secretary General and the European Commissioner for wholeheartedly supporting this project. Last but not least, I would like to thank Ms. Baleste and all the colleagues at IDEA for the incredible work they've done on this project in the past 1.5 months, 5 weeks, if I remember correctly. It's really a privilege to be working along such dedicated, hardworking, and extraordinary colleagues. So thank you again all for joining, and please visit idea.int if you want to find out more about our work on democracy and COVID-19. Thank you very much, and stay in touch.